Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football and preview the Rams-Seahawks game in Los Angeles on Sunday. Meaningless game for the Seahawks in record-wise and draft position-wise, but they still have some incentives to play for. Sounds like the coach is going to tee them up to play as a normal game, which I think is good for the team, good for the coaches, and trying to get that winning philosophy into ingrained into all of the players. I think that's probably more important than trying to rest guys or evaluate players. It could get to that. I think Seattle's going to start the game a certain way. Gino's going to get the start. He's going to get an opportunity to reach his incentives that would greatly impact his contract next year. We can talk about that too, because that's going to be a really important factor, I think. And then Tyler Lockett could be the last game in a Seahawks uniform. It's kind of a tough thing, but every player in the NFL gets to a certain point where it's their last game, and this may be Tyler's last game for a number of reasons. We can talk about that as well. Hope you're doing well, Keith. Happy New Year to you. It's the first time I've had a chance to talk to you after the ball dropped. Welcome in, man.
Yeah, thanks. New year, same old show that we've been doing for going on 9 years now. Well, we're going to start year 9, I guess. Season 9 is going to start here soon for us. But lots to talk about in this show. You start looking at this list of who are the highest paid Seahawks under contract for next year. And you start seeing guys who probably aren't going to be with the team next year. Tyler Lockett set to have a cap number of just under $31 million. Dre Jones said to have a cap number of just under $25.6 million. Uchenna Nwasu at $21.5. These are guys that honestly probably won't be back next year. So looking at this as their last game as a Seahawk is an interesting way of thinking about it, because you've got some guy, well, maybe not Jones, but Nwasu and Lockett have a history with this team. They have a track record and generally really liked by fans, and to have it be in a situation where you're probably watching them play their last game in a Seahawk uniform is kind of, I don't know, weird, depressing.
The crazy thing is, Keith, that 2024 was a big change year, right? Pete Carroll exits after a long tenure. It's really a reset of the culture. It's a reset of a new coaching staff, a whole way of doing business. You think that's the biggest change, right, on the horizon? But really, if you take a look at 2024, the way that free agency was approached, the way that Geno Smith provided the continuity at the quarterback position, the defense was fairly set as far as position groups, especially after Leonard Williams was signed to an extension. You're kind of running back the same group of people, save a few, different key position players, and a new coaching staff. Well, this year, that new coaching staff has had a chance to evaluate everything, and you've got a bunch of contracts that are kind of coming up that don't make a lot of sense. One could argue, team roster building wise, that this is going to be a larger, impactful offseason than last season. The coaching staff's been here for a year now. They have an opportunity to find the key additions to their roster that they want to take into the future to win more games, to win the division, to get into the playoffs. And what does all that entail? And you nailed it with those player contracts that are kind of upside down as far as excuse me, as far as talent uh, level is concerned with value.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to balance that in the NFL. You just do. Tyler Lockett is a prime example. It's a player that the team loves, John Schneider loves, coaches love, other players love, and especially the fans, right? The guy's been in town for over 10 seasons and deserves all the accolades. He's second overall in a lot of team wide
Yeah.
receiver records. And you want to make sure that you send him out the right way. And we've had issues with that over a little bit of time. Bobby Wagner is the player that comes to mind. The way that it's handled,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point, Tyler Lockett's going to have to agree to a massive pay cut, which is unlikely in the NFL, or he's going to get cut. And that's not a good thing for anybody. And
He's got no
he's
guaranteed salary for next year, and so he's got to look at this as a um, if he gets cut, um, he what's he going to make on the open market, especially given the last year and a half in terms of his production. He isn't going to get the um, 18 million that
yeah,
he's
no, he's going
due.
to get $3 or $4 million as a savvy veteran guy coming in to mentor a wide receiver
Yeah,
room.
and so he's got to look at it as um, he's currently on the books for $18 million um, in salary for Seattle, and if they want to cut that to 8 and save 10 million against the cap, is he willing to do that? That's probably a good idea for him because he'll make about twice what he would make if the Seahawks cut him and he has to go somewhere else.
If
Um,
the Seahawks cut him, Seattle will save 17 million against the cap. There will be nearly $14 million in dead money, but you make that business decision because of the cap savings, not because of the dead money.
yeah, so the dead money is basically because they already spent it. Essentially, they pushed the cap hit of his contract into future years in order to spend the money in the past. You kind of look at it as a function of the player's production versus the cap savings. And so if they were to cut Lockett after this year, they would 17 million even in terms of cap savings. Can you replace his production with less than 17 million? Yeah,
Let me ask you this
you can replace it
also,
with
and
5.
this is like the most important factor right here.
Mm-hmm.
Do they want him back? Do you want a Tyler Lockett on the Seahawks roster given the production and the value now? Can you get that value right? Can you restructure a contract in a way that's not going to push too many dollars forward another year or two? And can you get that down to a normal cap hit number that you would want him on the roster for in 2025?
Well, he's not there. There's no contract in for 2026 or 2027 in order to push money in that direction. So you'd have to extend him if you wanted to push it
Correct.
forward. And I don't think they do. I think that they're looking at this as um, let's go ahead and take the the dead money that's been built into his contract and let's make sure that um, we eat it in this year. And they either eat it with him on the roster or they eat him with him off the roster, but they eat it in this year. And that's how you get from a $17 million salary to a $31 million cap hit. It's $14 million of dead money, whether he's on the roster or not. And that's just past year's salary cap that's been pushed forward. And so I think that for the Seahawks, they're going to want to get that off the books in 2025, whether he's on the roster or not. Now, the
Now,
question is, can you take that $17 million that he's owed and reduce it to a number which is more fitting his production. And if you can get him for 7 or 8, you probably do it. If it requires 12 to keep him, you probably let him go. And that's just a business decision. And I hope that he's got a good agent who is being honest with him and being like, dude, you're not going to get it on the open market. And so do you want to stay with Seattle? And if so, take the offer for 7 or 8, because I think that's more than he'll get on the open market, and it keeps him in town.
And he's indicated just yesterday that he is intending to play in 2025, just in case there were listeners out there thinking that maybe he would just retire. And that is still a possibility. A player can reevaluate in the next couple months and make a decision at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one example.
If you're a certain center,
I can't possibly see Lockett doing that. And then you've got, a player like DK Metcalf, who's could be up for some sort of an extension or restructure. And when you've got a big contract like that, he's got way more dead money though than cap savings. So he's upside down a little bit, but his cap number is $31.875 million.
Yeah, his cap number is huge. His dead money would be 21. And so the cap savings would only be, 10.9. You cannot replace Metcalf's production and what he adds to a roster within 10.9 million. You can't. So you keep him. And if you want to push some of that 21 million in dead money out into, later years, then, you can do that. He's got another year under his contract in 2026. And in 2026, he's got a cap number of 7.1 million. So it's technically a void year, meaning that he's not intended to play on that year, but it's there. And so they can remove the void status from it, push stuff into the future in order to make it work for the team and get his cap number down
and add a year or two.
Yeah, and they could definitely
and still have him eligible for free agency before the age of 30, which is going to be his agent's big deal.
Yeah, I mean they've got void years sitting on his contract all the way out to 2028. So if you remove the void status on those years, you have lots of room to play with, and you can add salary, and you can give him another signing bonus in order to basically make it a new contract. And then, but you take this year of that, going into it with that 31 million, and you can drop that considerably. You can probably get it down to 18 fairly easily.
Let's talk about DK just for a second, as far as the player, the impact, the cap hit, etc. And a blue chip player on your roster where you've only got, well, maybe 1 or 2 on offense, right? And you've got 3 on defense, and you really probably should have 7 or 8 if you're going to be a competitive roster in the NFL at the highest level.
Who are your blue chip players on offense?
Well, I would fringy count Geno Smith, in only that he's your kind of franchise quarterback at the moment, and he's arguably top 12 to 15 in the league.
See, I don't consider him blue chip. Is he a good player?
I get
yes.
That.
Can you win with him? Yeah, but I don't consider him a blue chip foundational piece, because honestly, he is a guy that you are always looking. You're always looking for an opportunity to upgrade. Now,
I would
finding that upgrade is really hard.
Yeah, I would say JSN and fringy Ken Walker. It could be, not yet, just based on production. And maybe Charles Cross.
I would put Charles Cross before Geno and Walker.
Yeah. but that's
because
it, right? That's your
one
best
of the
players on offense.
yeah, the conversation one of the conversations that I think we need to have here is, um, should Zach Charbonnet be the number one running back in Seattle?
Yeah, going into the future.
And you look at the 4 games so far this year that he's had, um, at least 12 carries,
Yeah.
and he's been the significantly better player,
Would you flip?
more productive player
Would
behind
you
the same
flip
offensive line.
Ken Walker for a 5th-round pick?
Um, Probably.
That's where it's at. I mean, we're just trying to be real, guys. It's like uh, we tend to overvalue our players, and everyone thinks, well, you get a better offensive coordinator in, you commit to the run, maybe upgrade a couple interior offensive linemen, and Ken Walker becomes a different player. Yeah, all of that is true, but it's also true that he's susceptible to injury. He only played in 12 games this year, similar situation last year, etc. So you kind of have to say, well, you go look at the draft, and we will, but early looking at the draft for me indicates that there's going to be a ton of running backs in this draft that are going to be draft eligible and available in rounds 1 through 5. And if you want a running back to add to your room and infuse some talent, you're going to have that opportunity. Now, do Seattle, take one of their 6 or 7 draft picks and invest into the running back position? History with John Schneider indicates yes. And so we'll see how that plays out. But I think that they would consider trading him for a mid to late round draft pick in 2025. Just because I think you're not going to extend him. He's not going to be on the roster, I don't think, for a second contract. It just doesn't match up with production. Now, potential, sure, but it's hard to give players contracts like that on potential alone. He's got to have it out on the field. He's going to have this next season to figure it out if he remains on the roster, but we'll see how that goes.
So you said you wanted to talk about Metcalf. So far in 14 games, because he's missed a couple games this year, he has 939 scrimmage yards, which is almost entirely receiving. In fact, it's 100% receiving. They haven't used him on an end around or anything like that once. And so with 1 game left, he's probably going to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark.
How important is he to the offense, Keith?
I think he's incredibly important to the offense.
I do too.
He's the guy that the defense is key on. Like people are, talking about JSN and what a monster year he's had, and he has had a monster year. But he has had a monster year because defenses are scared of DK Metcalf. And they are pushing their resources defensively, their safety play and all that kind of stuff in DK Metcalf's way, and it creates space for JSN.
JSN has essentially taken over Tyler Lockett's role in this offense, and not Metcalf. So if you're going to ship off Metcalf for a 2nd-round draft pick or a 3rd-rounder, which is where his value is, especially after this season,
I don't think that's true. I still think he's worthy of a 1st-round pick if someone wants him.
I don't think you're going to have many people agree with that. I think that is not proven out with all of. Yeah. Okay. Go do that. We'll have a conversation if we go research that and bring it back to the next show, because I think what you'll find is receivers have not been getting that in the last 4 years. I think 2nd-rounder for his talent level is kind of where the market's been. There hasn't been really any 1st-round picks given for wide receiver trades in the NFL in the last 4 years. And so
my memory is I can't give you a player name, but my memory is
Brown, like AJ Brown, or
wanting to contradict that, because I know it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we saw AJ Brown go for a second, and then a week later, a couple of guys go for 1st-round picks, and everyone was like, wow, they did not get enough for Brown, but because the market shifted, and I remember the market shifting in that direction, but I couldn't tell you who it was. So yeah, we need to research that. I just think that we've got a situation where you cannot replace Metcalf's value to the offense um, with a draft pick in the second or third round.
I think
You're not going to do that.
Where this roster is at right now, you don't intentionally ship off a player like DK Metcalf for a draft pick that may or may not be worth anything, really.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he's a blue chip. Him and JSN, I think, are the two true blue chip players on offense.
I think I'd rather invest in a proven commodity at offensive coordinator to increase the opportunity for DK Metcalf to be successful on this roster and with a quarterback, whether it's or another one. I think I'd rather do that than ship DK off and have regrets about not having trying to fill that void. And I think that the way the salary cap is set up, and you mentioned the structure of his contract, I think there's room there to figure that out.
Absolutely.
So I don't see DK going anywhere. I know that there's chatter, and there will always be chatter around a player of his caliber because he's got value. And anytime you have a player of value, the opportunity cost and so forth can be debated among fans to figure out if it's worth it to ship him off. And that conversation is always going to be there for a player like him.
And it's also being generated because you look at this early this season and in training camp and there was so much chatter coming from other teams. Apparently Pittsburgh really wanted to work out a trade for Metcalf. And there was just a lot of talk, and it just kept coming up. What do they have to give up to get him, and all of this. And Seattle wasn't really interested in making that deal, but Pittsburgh was, and so there was a lot of talk about it. But that doesn't mean Seattle's shopping him or anything like that. I mean, it's all coming from the other side, and so I think that a lot of that should be calmed down, because guys like Metcalf, if you look around the league, the vast majority of them are first round picks. And so if you're letting him go, you're committing a first round pick in order to replace him and his value to the roster. Now, the Seahawks got lucky. He's a second round pick. He fell. There's a reason why he fell. And it turned out that, that reason was less meaningful than people thought on draft day, and it turned out to be a great pickup and a great player. But those kind of situations are rare. A lot of the guys that have, his pedigree are first round picks. And so unless you're getting that for him and you've got a guy in mind that you think will line up better in terms of age and your roster makeup and that kind of stuff, and you're getting a first round pick for him, this isn't a good plan in any way. You're only making your team weaker by trading a guy like Metcalf. So I don't think that this is a situation where they're going to do that. This is going to be a contract extension year for him. He's going to get his per year salary kind of realigned, but that involves shifting dead money from his old contract out over 3 or 4 years. And if they can get him a 2-year extension, so that way he's hitting free agency at 29, they'll probably do that because that's what his agent will want.
He's 28 right now.
Okay. Well, I was just looking at the stat sheet. It's got him listed at 27. Yeah. So I guess you'd have get him a 2-year extension and have him hit it at 30. His agent's probably going to want 1 more year and find a way to make that work. But
they're going to, or they will negotiate a longer contract and he'll be a Seahawk. He'll be like, winding down his career here and move around a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years of his eligibility in the NFL, and then he'll get out. So
Yeah.
this next contract for him is probably his most important one in his
Mm-hmm.
estimation. And I would tend to agree with that. So I don't, they may mess around with cap hits and so forth. Initially, they'll be selling the idea that the cap will be going up exponentially, and they want a certain percentage of that cap. They'll probably be kind of working off that. I would imagine. But if they can get that $32 million cap hit down to say 18 in 2025, I think that's what's going to happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they may not do anything with that contract and they'll let them play it out. I don't think so. I think John Schneider's
If they
going to
were,
be looking for a way to get flexibility in
mm-hmm.
free agency this year, and there's money there to be had with DK's contract. I think they're going to try to figure something out. Now, they may not be able to figure it out, but I think they'll try. So, question for you. So, I think this is going to be one of John Schneider's most consequential off seasons. Last year was really important. I thought he nailed it for the most part, with the exception of some free agency stuff. But at the time, when free agency was actually happening, it seemed like we were nailing some of those. I
Well,
disagreed with a few of them, like Lake and
it was a
Tomlinson
lot.
and so forth. But there
Yeah,
was
I
only
mean,
so
but
much resources to go around.
it was a lot of budget stuff, a lot of 1-year contracts. It was
Right.
let's fill out a roster so we can play it, have a seat, have a team, and give guys a chance, and give McDonald a chance. But um, there were no Dre
Long-term
Jones
commitments to back.
contract where it
Yeah.
was like a
Yeah. Right.
3-year 51 million type of deal. Um, though those didn't happen. It was his misses were a 1-year $5.5 million dollar contract on a middle linebacker that was used as a trade piece to get a foundational um, blue chip defender. So I don't know if you can really count that too much as a miss. I mean, that was a uh, pretty good deal in the end because it led to Ernest Jones.
Right. So,
um,
talking about 2025 and Gino. So if Gino, and we can talk about that, and Gino's going to be probably a show on its own. But
yeah.
if the Seahawks go into 2025 with Geno Smith as still the quarterback and they miss the playoffs, I
Hmm.
think John Schneider's job could be on the hot seat.
Especially if they miss the playoffs because Gino has another year like this year. Um,
And we're going to have a new
where
offensive coordinator. So, I mean, he's going to get a chance to reset, if you will, his play, his numbers, everything. And if he has a similar year and the offense has a similar slide, it could be messy next year.
yeah. And I mean, it's if this team doesn't get into the playoffs a year from now, um, it's I mean that's this the roster is in a situation where they should be better. So
Here's the hard part, and you know this too because you've been around football for a long time. We are in the throes of the NFL's middle class.
yeah.
We have won 9 or 10 games for 3 or 4, 5 seasons, 6, whatever it is. Like we are stuck. Okay, which is the worst place you can be in the NFL. We've talked about that endlessly over the last 5 years of this show. How do you get out of it, right? Without taking a big swing? Because we're not in a position to take a big swing. We
Hmm.
don't have early draft pick. We are picking in the middle again now, over and over in each round. You bring back Geno Smith. You almost lock yourself into a not a top 10 quarterback. You're top 15, but that's kind of his cap. That's where he's shown that he lives in the
Yeah.
NFL. Now he's statistically in a couple categories, like, completion percentage and attempts and so forth is top 5, and but only because of the volume, you know.
Well,
Um,
completion percentage is an overrated stat. I mean, there's obviously a minimum, but when your air yards per attempt are low, um, then it doesn't matter because that means you're completing a lot of screens and bubble screens and quick things around the line of scrimmage. Um, Geno Smith is high on the completion percentage meter, but with his air yards per attempt at under 7, that's why he's going to have a completion percentage so high. And basically he's relying on yak stuff. And that's what's going to hurt. I mean, that's what's really going to get him the stats and that kind of stuff, is he's throwing a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage and watching JSN run. And so I'm not a huge completion percentage. Look, his touchdown percentage at 3.1 is pretty low.
Not good.
That's really low.
It's really low. And he had 5 red zone interceptions this year.
God, and that led the entire league. And he's second in the NFL in interceptions. He's 1 behind Kirk Cousins.
So the only thing that he's been unlucky a few times. He's got like the 11th or 12th ranked turnover worthy plays at quarterback, but he's second at or first in interceptions. So there's some luck involved in those sorts of stats. But those red zone ones where you've got to be laser focused has been less than optimal this year. Mm-hmm. And those are and that's why you hear that's why the fan base is so divided right now, as far as and other pundits and so forth is it Geno's issue or is it the offensive coordinator? Well, it's probably a combination of both.
It's a combination of both. Let's not. This isn't a one or the other. Could Geno have played better in the environment he has with the offensive line he has and the offensive coordinator has? And you cannot look at his performance and not say, yeah, he could have been better, because he could have been better.
But he was playing in a one-dimensional offensive coordinator's offense.
So there were limitations. We're not expecting him to have this monster season because of the limitations of the offensive line and the offensive coordinator. But given the environment that he's in, he still didn't have a great year. I mean, he didn't.
I think what it comes down to for me, go ahead.
I want to say, I think that really is what you've got to look at it within the context of what he's given. Should he have played better? And I think the answer is yes.
So here's the dilemma for John Schneider in the offseason. The factors are A, Geno Smith as a player, B, Geno Smith as a cap number, C, Geno Smith as it relates to other options in the offseason.
That's the bigger
other
problem.
veteran signal callers you consider. Some of the names out there are Sam Darnold, who it looks like every indication are that the Vikings want to retain him. Yes. Kirk Cousins, who was benched in Atlanta. Russell Wilson.
You're going to have to trade for Cousins because they aren't. The Falcons are not cutting him with all of that guaranteed money. They gave him $100 million guaranteed.
No one's going to trade for Kirk Cousins.
Well, they're not cutting him because think about it. They would have to cut a third of their roster in order to make up for the dead.
He's going to have an $89 million dead cap hit for years for like 3 years. It's crazy. But I've seen teams Denver just go ahead and make that decision to move off of a bad deal, and it may be one of those deals. Russell Wilson is the other quarterback out there that may be available. We don't know. The other one out there, a veteran, quote unquote, available could be JJ McCarthy, which is the most interesting. Well, he is after. Well, he didn't. Yeah, you're right. He didn't play.
He hurt his tore his ACL at the start of training.
Well, that's even better. It's even better if you really think about it. Not for him, but for us, because he's got that extra year of eligibility. So JJ McCarthy might be the most interesting name to talk about in the offseason as it relates to a quarterback who's been on a roster, not necessarily played, but been around a team.
He was so young at the time
Yeah,
of being
22.
drafted too. He
Yeah.
was 20. He was 21. I think it was 20 at draft time. Turned 21 just after.
Wow.
So he's 21 now, and so he'll be 21 going into next season. Yeah, he's a kid that is he's
He's
super young.
drafted in the top 10. He's more
Yep.
of a kind of a point guard type quarterback,
Yeah.
if we're going to
I
be
mean,
honest.
he's like a
Brock
well, there's a
Purdy,
lot of guys. A Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold,
right?
G, kind of Geno Smith by reputation, although he's can push the ball down the field when given an opportunity. Um, I think that's going to be an interesting. If
But do
you are,
you,
if you're
but do
Minnesota,
you, if you are Seattle, do you, when you're pushing to the playoffs, you're John Schneider, and you know your job's on the line for a team that if you don't make the playoffs, you could be gone. Do you put your faith in a quarterback like JJ McCarthy on your roster?
well, I think you have an opportunity. If you have an opportunity to get yourself that young franchise quarterback on a rookie deal and all of that, I think you do. Because if you can move on
Do you
from Geno Smith,
simultaneously move off Geno Smith when you
yeah,
do that, or and then go get like what, like a middling placeholder bridge lower cost QB to come in to start initially and then see where JJ's at
I wouldn't
after training
even.
camp?
I mean, I would make sure that you have a veteran backup, but you go into the year thinking that JJ is gonna be your guy, and you're gonna take your
Wow,
lumps for the first couple of weeks, the
man,
same way
oh,
the
that's
Broncos
tough.
did with Bo Nix, and it worked
Yeah,
out for them. Yeah,
it did work out, but it's often it does not.
um, and you take that cap space that you would save from Geno, and you go out and you invest in the best guard on the market, and
Yeah.
maybe
There's
the
going to
best
be a
center
huge
on.
argument. There's going to be a huge argument in with not only our show, but everyone is going to be talking about your exact scenario, because there's a very good case to be made for exactly what you just talked about, and there's a very good case about staying with a known quantity and going into a season with a veteran coach now who wants to win, and may look at Geno Smith as being the best opportunity to win in the
Okay,
NFL.
but yes, next year. What about the year after?
Yeah, totally.
If you're the GM, you can't just be looking at 1 year.
That's
You've
why I
got to
said, do
have.
you move off Geno simultaneously while bringing in JJ McCarthy? I'm not sure the answer is so simple.
Well, the only way that you can move, the only way that you can keep Geno with the cap situation that the Seahawks are in is if you extend him and get his cap number down.
I disagree, only because I think you could conceivably, and I could be totally proven wrong, but Geno's cap number next year is 38.5.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of you can make a lot of money available in free agency without touching Geno's contract, and let Geno play out that final year and then not have anything remaining. That may be the best choice, because that forces you to kind of make decisions in 2026. But
See, I'm looking
that's
at
another discussion.
if you're going to let's say they keep Geno, right? You're going to get 9 million from Noah Fant, 8.5 from Nuwasu, um,
You can generate
11
about
and
45 to $60 million without
11 and a
touching
half,
Geno,
11 and a half from Dre Jones, and 17 from Tyler Lockett, right?
and
Those are
a number of other little deals. But yeah,
I
you're
mean,
right.
everything else that you're going to do is going to be, I mean, yeah,
Peripheral.
there can be some restructures with DK and that kind of stuff, but you're already 8 million over. So whatever you
Correct.
generate, you're really generating 8 million less than that, because the first 8 million just gets you into the cap. And so if you generate 40, that really gives you 32. That is very little room to
I
work
mean, you could take
given.
Geno's dead cap number this year of 13.5, and you could double that and create a void year and kind of get Gino in the building for like 30 and pick up an additional 8 million in cap savings by just kind of tweaking it a little bit. But
But
I'm not
pushing
necessarily
it,
convinced that we should add years to Gino's contract.
well, yeah, because it pushes the dead money into the following year. If you do that, you add a void year. Basically, it's no, um, it's no for Gino. It doesn't change anything. So typically, they'll sign it because it allows them to put a better team around him for the
And
year that he's
they
with
might
them.
give him more guaranteed money this season.
Yeah,
Or
because right,
you know,
because he's currently
right.
got zero guaranteed money next year. So if they guarantee half his contract, um, in order to get him to drop his cap number. And so yeah, so you take that 13 and a half and you make it 6.5 in terms of dead money, and you get his cap number down to 32, but it generates 16 and a half, or sorry, 6.5 million in cap space. Okay, so you do that. Like that's actually manageable a year from now. So there are things like that that you can do to keep him around, but it's hard to look at the roster and all the different guys that have to be signed, including Ernest Jones, and say that 30 million or 32 million dollars in cap space is going to be enough. Now, if you do that, what we just talked with Gina, you make it 40, and you go, that's kind of putting you in a little bit of gray area. I think you're going to need more than that this year, just because of the volume of players that have. Like, there's just a lot of guys on the roster on 1-year deals that are not under contract, and you have to, have a 90-man roster. So, um, yeah, I think they're going to need more than that number, but regardless, what we're both talking about here is the problem with being in quarterback purgatory,
Mm-hmm.
and that is your quarterback is good enough to get you into the playoffs or at least close. Um, so you're never in position to draft a quarterback, but you aren't good enough to compete for a title, and that's why you see so many teams. Um, when they have a really good quarterback, they win when that quarterback is on the rookie contract, but then struggle once they get into that second contract. Because when you can put a team around them, you're going to win. And then when you start to not be able to put a team around them because you're paying the quarterback so much, it becomes harder. And then you'll see guys, lesser quarterbacks, um, have a better shot at the Super Bowl because they're making less, but they're younger. It's kind of it's the nature of the NFL. Like, how many veteran quarterbacks that are making top 10 quarterback money have won the Super Bowl in recent years? And there's
Yeah.
one, Patrick Mahomes. That's it. Um, and people say, Tom Brady. Yeah, Tom Brady always took less. He was never a top 10 like moneymaker. He was 17th. Um, and so yeah, he's a guy that um, defied logic in that he could have made way more, but he didn't need it. He had
I mean,
lots of other income sources.
I do kind of like the way Schneider approached this with Geno Smith over the last few years, and that Geno has got a cap number that's right at like 12th in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL as far as it rates, and that's next year. That's like with at 38.5.
Yeah.
That's ranked 12th as far as quarterbacks are paid. I get that. I understand. It's just a weird sort of only quarterbacks have we're dealing with that sort of a thing. The interesting thing about JJ McCarthy is, well, did John Schneider like him in last year's draft? Would he have drafted him given the opportunity? Are there other quarterbacks in this draft? Shader, Saunders, Cam Ward, Carson Beck, those kind of players are gone before Seattle picks at 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's left after that? Is there a guy, in the middle rounds that you would want to invest in and kind of bring along? Well, that's the thing. They're not ready necessarily to play in 2025. So you do need a bridge like Gino or somebody like Gino on your roster. It just becomes it's a never ending kind of a thing for a team that's stuck in the middle, which is where Seattle's at. So they're going to have to knock this thing out of the park. If they're going all in on JJ McCarthy, giving up 2025 first round draft pick to Minnesota to do it, you do it, because if the evaluation is there and JJ McCarthy's their guy and they make that pick, or that trade to do it, I would stand behind that, but it's very expensive. You got to be, everything else has to line up for you too. And JJ still probably wouldn't be your starting quarterback in 2025 if you're Mike McDonald, because there's just too much on the line.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at, you look at the veteran quarterbacks that are out there that you would have. Let's say you sign, or you do move on from Geno. You make that first round pick trade with the Vikings to get you JJ McCarthy, and you're going to need another quarterback. So go down the list of free agent quarterbacks that you could bring in. Jimmy Garoppolo is there. Jameis Winston, Justin
Who we're going to
Fields.
face on Sunday, by the way.
Yeah. Drew Lock, you could bring him back. Zach Wilson.
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson almost certainly is going to be re-signed by Pittsburgh. That's why they made the switch to him, was to figure out if they could win a if you could win with him going forward. And I think they believe they can, which is why they stuck with him instead of letting the younger player
Justin
play.
Fields.
But yeah,
and so Justin Fields could be available.
He probably will be available. And so Justin Fields is a guy that I think we've seen now on two teams that he is got a lot of athletic ability, but he's limited as a quarterback. He's more of a runner. But he's a type of guy that you could bring in and put an offense together around, where you're asking him to do a lot of read option, run pass option kind of plays, and have that get you through 3 or 4 weeks while you get McCarthy ready.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the Steelers did, is they ran with him for a few weeks while Wilson got healthy, and then made that switch. And
I mean, at some point you have to say, okay, John Schneider and Mike McDonald, they're secure enough to be able to develop a quarterback on an ascending roster that's primary goal is to improve enough to win the division and make the playoffs and win in the playoffs. You, at some point you have to, because there's nothing. I mean, unless you believe Sam Howell's going to be the guy, and you haven't heard anything from the coaching staff that would indicate otherwise, other than he had a terrible game when he did have the opportunity. That doesn't mean that he's a complete waste of a prospect. So we should still kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Too.
And maybe that is the thing, is that if you bring in McCarthy and jettison Geno, that you're looking at a competition between getting McCarthy ready and Sam Howell. And we know what Howell did a year ago with the Commanders, where he threw more touchdown passes with the Commanders than Geno Smith has thrown this year. Just throwing that out there, with a significantly less talented roster. And so there's that. And maybe that's the direction that the team chooses to go, rather than going, oh, we've got to go get a veteran quarterback, a Jimmy Garoppolo type, who only made $3.1 million this year.
So you came into this show right before we push record, and you said, I am ready to talk about this game as it were a regular game. And we have spent literally 0 seconds talking about this upcoming game on Sunday. So I want to give you an opportunity to actually talk about what you prepared for.
Well, I don't care. That doesn't bother me. The
It's so
Rams,
easy to get sidetracked in these conversations. You know, these are fun conversations you
it
have,
is
and
because now
we're
that
going to have
we're
them
in,
these, but
the
we
Seahawks
still have
aren't in
game.
off-season mode yet because they've still got, this meaningless game to play against perceivably a bunch of backups for the Rams. But we're in off-season mode. And so yeah, it's easy to just kind of look past. It's hard to know what the Rams are going to give you. Like we could talk about them and how their defense is still actually one of the worst in the league. It's pretty bad. Now, they were historically bad early in the year and they've gotten better. They've mainly gotten better because they've put in a lot of faith in a rookie class, guys like Cam Kitchens and Jared Verse and guys that have developed and look better now than they did earlier in the year, like far better now than they did earlier in the year. And
Yeah,
I think that the Rams, I don't believe, are a team that's going away. Like the 49ers are clearly in decline. Yeah, they've got Brock Purdy, but they're going to have to pay him. And that defense is in shambles compared to what it used to be. And they don't have the offensive line they used to, and they're going to have to make a decision on, McCaffrey, and so they're clearly in rapid decline. Um, Arizona seems to be on the ascent, but they're also in that kind of land where we've seen a lot of teams get to where they are right now, where they look on the cusp and then fall back off. Um, the
and I
Rams aren't
still
going
don't
away.
believe in Kyler Murray. It's
Yeah,
tough.
the Rams. I don't believe are going away now, unless Matthew Stafford just suddenly declines because of age. Um, they're a team with, young players like Puka Nacua, and Williams as their skill position guys. You've got a bunch of young players on defense. And although the defense isn't good at the moment, they're in a position where they can turn around and, restock a little bit in this offseason, to join in with a young core of guys that are playmakers. So if you are the Rams, you're thinking, all right, so they pulled out a division win this year when they didn't think they were gonna be able to, and were they 1-4 after 5 games before they finally
That's
started to
exactly
turn
right.
things around. Um, they if you're a Rams fan, you're feeling pretty good. And so the Seahawks have to look at this as a situation where this Rams team that they're going to play is their competition next year. That's who you're gunning for, because they won the division this year. Granted, I think Seattle kind of gave it away, but they won the division, and I think they're going to be better next year. They made it through their transition year away from Aaron Donald and a bunch of other vets, um, and won the division doing it. So the Seahawks need to look at this as how do we combat um, the Rams, and running out Geno Smith when the other side's got Matthew Stafford, who is a better quarterback, and um, people saying otherwise need to stop, take their homer hat off for a second and really evaluate quarterbacks. Stafford's one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and they've got all those young players on defense and some other young. You've got to look at the situation. And go, what can we do to get to be better than the Rams? They think
Yeah,
they've narrowed the coaching discrepancy quite a bit. It's hard with McVay because I think he's still one of the best coaches in the league, if not the best coach in the league behind Andy Reid. But um, they've narrowed that discrepancy. You got to find other places where you can make up ground or basically get ahead of them, so you can get ahead of them in the standings. And it's hard when you're at such a disadvantage at a key position like quarterback.
yeah. I think this is another opportunity for Seattle just to collect data points on
Mm-hmm.
different things about this team. I think they're doing the right thing by running out their starters on both offense and defense in this game. I'm talking about Seattle, in that it gives everyone that needs their incentives reached for contract purposes and opportunity to do so. I think that's really kind of standing behind your team, standing behind your players, right thing to do. Even with Gino, I think it could be as much as adding $6 million to his 2025 cap, and that's tough to do. But the team has never been a team that kind of makes it difficult for players to reach their incentives, and so I like
Yeah.
that aspect of it. The winning culture that Mike McDonald's trying to build. He's trying to get to 10 wins, even though it's insignificant and would be somewhat meaningless against a team that's not playing all their starters. I still think it's an important thing for Mike McDonald, and if it's important for him, it's important for
Well,
everyone.
you have a
So
chance to go 4-2 in your division, winning record. The fact that you can say that you split against the team that won the division, that you finished with the same record as them, so it came down to all sorts of um, tiebreaker situations and more to do with what
right,
opponents did. Because if your opponents had won more in weeks that you didn't play them, then you would have made won the division. There's aspects to this that allow you to sell to free
a
agents
narrative,
that you're
yes,
building and that you're close and you're just
and you're
that
committed to
one
winning. And at the
that
end of the day, it's all about winning.
yeah, that you're a guard and a center away from being a contender and all of that. So yeah, I mean there's a lot for the Seahawks to play for, even though it's meaningless. The Rams are locked in with their playoff position. There's nothing for them to play for, considering they keep going. So they are going to be playing a lot of backups. We already know that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start, not let Stafford get out there and possibly get hurt. This is exactly the opposite situation that I expected this game to be when the season started. I had the Seahawks sitting at 10 wins right now and resting guys because they were in a spot where it didn't matter. And they had a playoff game to worry about. And that's why I had them at 10 wins, where you had them at 12, was because I figured the Rams are going to come in and beat them here because they've got stuff to play for and the Seahawks don't. And in a way, it's the other way around. The Rams really don't have much to play for in this game. The Seahawks do. And so I'm, got kind of expecting a win by Seattle simply because I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo and a Cooper Cup-less Rams offense, and with a lot of backup and not Williams at running back, are going to put up any points whatsoever on Seattle's defense. Seattle's
Yeah,
defense
interesting.
is legit. They've gone from being really, really bad 9 weeks in to being a top 7 defense statistically now. And
Yeah,
that give you an idea of how that shift from 25th to 7th over 8 weeks, 9 weeks means they've been a top 2 or top 3 defense over that time period.
so
So
DVOA compared to 2023, the defense overall was ranked at this time with one game left 28th last year.
mm-hmm.
This year we're ranked 11th. That's a 17 position gain in DVOA. Pass defense was 28th. We're now 8th in pass defense, and run defense was 25th. We're now 11th.
Yeah.
So those are big improvements for Mike McDonald and company.
Yeah, that's why they brought Mike McDonald in, because that's what he did to Baltimore, and that's what he's known for around the league. He is a guy that's going to make your defense better. Now,
We can all look forward to it being even more improved next year, right?
Yeah, because he's going to have a chance to get more of his guys. Guys like Ernest Jones and Williams up front, and that kind of stuff. They're going to be able to. They're going to be better. But now he's got to do something similar on the offense, because that offense is awful. It's just genuinely awful. Now that's probably going to necessitate a coaching change, and if it doesn't, then it's going to require a major overhaul of players. And so,
Did you
yeah, that
know, and just talking about the defense one last time, did you know that the defense had that improvement? So we're 10th in points and 13th in yards allowed, EPA success rate, et cetera, is ninth. A lot of statistics were just right there at 10 overall,
mm-hmm.
while facing the second hardest offensive schedule in the NFL per DVOA in
Yeah,
2024.
yeah,
That's impressive.
they played a lot of really good offenses. um,
Yeah. Yeah. So that's even more impressive to me is we didn't do it against, chump change in the NFL. We did it against the best
yeah,
and we made those sorts of improvements. I'm really looking forward to what's in store for the defense in 2025. I mean, massive improvement over what we were. Um, I don't think there's any incremental. I think it's going from like 10 to number one. I mean, that's really kind of what I'm trying to look forward to. Now the
yeah.
offense is
I would say
horrible in
they're
a similar situation. I think
yeah.
Mike McDonald and John Schneider this offseason will be looking for an offensive coordinator, kind of head coach of the offense, so that Mike McDonald doesn't have to worry about it. He's got an experienced play caller back there that is going to be able to take the offense similarly from low 20 rankings into the high teens or single digit success rate, because when they do that, and if they do that, they will be a contender.
You got a coach in mind?
Maybe the Pete's guy currently on the roster would be kind of an internal candidate. We can talk about that more as I get more information about him, but I think he's going to be in a conversation to as far as continuity, as well as a guy that was kind of coveted a year ago. They were able to kind of get him, but he's kind of one of those guys from the Sean McVay tree that teams will be looking at, and he's going to get an opportunity at some point. They may look internally at a guy like that. Outside, you go to the regular
See,
names, right?
he's not
Mike
an experienced.
Kafka.
Yeah,
No,
he's
he's
not
not.
the guy you're bringing up is not an experienced guy. He doesn't fit what you were saying. That whole description of,
Exactly.
head coach of the offense,
If
and
they were
I
going to
think
do
they,
internal, though, I think they would go that way. But outside, you're going to go through the list of, all the names we've been talking about over the last 4 years,
yeah,
essentially.
you're going to look at a guy like Eric Bieniemy, who at one point was kind of the shine of the NFL, and then struggled in Washington under a previous administration and coaching staff, and has kind of lost that shine, and is going to be available, but he has that proven track record over many
What
years.
do you do with Sam
Um,
Howell if he comes in?
See,
This would be crazy.
it depends. I don't know if it might be one of those situations where that's the two of them are looking forward to that
I don't think
because
that it's going to be a guy like Bieniemy. And the reason for that is that Mike McDonald's going to want to run the ball, and the last time Bieniemy was an offensive coordinator, he did not.
that's true. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, there's going to be options. There's going to be guys out there, guys that have a proven track record of
Yes, right.
being an offensive coordinator. Maybe look at one of the guys that is a failed head coach, um, but was a great offensive coordinator, which is why they got the job. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
yeah, interesting. Yeah, it'll be fascinating. This off season is going to be fascinating because I think the team is on the cusp. There's enough um, opportunity as far as the roster is currently constructed, and then you add a few pieces, and I don't think the offense is as bad as it looks on paper. I think the offensive coordinator was just that bad. Rookie guy, didn't have any NFL experience, just, thought it would work. We entered the process of looking for an offensive coordinator late and took the best one that we could that was available. But I think Mike McDonald's going to want an experienced guy that knows how to run the ball. You're going to see a new offensive line coach, no doubt. that's going to come in, a new run game coordinator, et cetera. I mean, it's going to be, they're really going to kind of throw everything they've got at the offense this year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it'll be fascinating to watch that play out.
Cool.
That's it. That's all I had for this show. I mean, way more than I thought we were going to get into, but
And we
fun
only touched on a
conversation.
lot of stuff. We're gonna have full shows looking at things like just quarterback options and that discussion and comparing Gino to other quarterbacks in the league versus salary cap and you know all that kind
Yes,
of
sometime
we have whole shows
between
on some of the stuff.
sometime between now and this time next week, I will have done a full off-season schedule for us that kind of outlines, because there's so much that you need to fit in between now and the draft, that it's important that you kind of lay it all out ahead of time. And maybe we can bring some guests on this year too. We've just been very busy individually to be able
Mm-hmm.
to go and have guests on and coordinate all that stuff. But I think we need to try to do a little bit better job on doing that. And yeah, fun stuff. So let's go win this game,
Yep.
have fun, enjoy Tyler Lockett. Hopefully he has a nice little game. Some other players that we know probably will not be on the roster next year, and just enjoy this time of the year. And we are what we are. We're still a decent team. 10 wins is nothing to slouch at in the NFL. Just didn't make that playoff cut. But the offseason starts as soon as this thing's over, and we go forward. A lot to look forward to. I really think so.
If the Seahawks win and get to 10 wins, I think they're going to be the first 10-win team not to make the playoffs since they expanded to the 7 team format per
Yep. Per conference.
uh
Yeah, it's true.
per conference.
Yeah. It is what it is. I think it plays into, more of the strength of the NFC is a little stronger now than it was even just last year. Which is what it is. And you just got to go out and win your division. I think that should be the goal next year, and I think that will be the goal.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun.
Can't
fun
expect
year.
a wild card to get you through when you've got
No,
the NFC North putting together 3 11 or
and that
12 win
doesn't look like it's
teams.
going to go away anytime soon.
No, none of those teams are looking like they're going to fall off. So
I think I agree with you in that it's a 2-horse race in the NFC West next year, and with Arizona still coming up a little short. But you never know what happens in the offseason. They have the most ammunition, both in cap space and draft picks, to improve. And they do a good job. I mean, Austin Fort is a good general manager. I think that they're going to do everything they can to be competitive. So this could turn into the NFC North, as far
I
as
mean, you've got
being competitive.
I honestly don't think the Rams are going anywhere. I said that earlier. The Seahawks are an ascending team. That need just a couple of offensive linemen would have made this team unstoppable. And I agree. Arizona. I'm not a Kyler Murray believer. Earlier in his career, it was like watching a young Russell Wilson with the way that he extended plays. He was so frustrating to play against. But now he just kind of hasn't taken that step where he's turned into the elite passer. He hasn't done the Lamar Jackson thing. And I think they've kind of reached his ceiling. You can put a great roster around him, but I think they've kind of reached the ceiling that they can get with him. And so, yeah, I just look at them as they're going to be a tougher team, a tougher a tougher win if you're going to beat them, but that doesn't make them a contender. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough thing. And I'm sorry, San Francisco fans. I think you're starting to see they held it together for as long as they could, but it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it'll be Purdy. but after that, I don't know that they can build the roster around just him.
Yeah.
He's good, but he needs the talent.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button. Leave some comments. Have a great game, and we'll see you early next week for the recap and the rest of the offseason. So till then, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.